recording in progress episode of the Square and Compass podcast. A super fun episode because I am back virtually, at least, in Los Angeles, speaking to Jeff Greenberg, owner, CEO of the Village Studios. And the Village Studios is a really, really cool place. It's housed in a 1920s era Masonic temple. And it's great to see, and this is something I talk about on my podcast all the time, it's great to see Masonic temples find new life and become a new home for people. And in this case, a home for music, which is something I love. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. I'm honored to be here, Cameron. And it was really a pleasure to meet you in person, too.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you as well. And the entire staff of Village Studios were so accommodating. And it was just a really amazing place, especially when you think about, I walk into or wheel into the studios and I see on the walls Counting Crows, Dr. Dre, is the home of Fleetwood Mac, and little old me still gets, what feels like a VIP treatment. And it was just a really welcoming place.
I think getting the VIP treatment probably comes from how you occur as a human being. You are an invitation, I think, to everybody that meets you. It must be, we have a Brooklyn bookkeeper at the Village. Her name is Dina. And when Harry Styles came in and started making us tea and stuff, he was so charming. Dina went, "You must have a really good mother." So I would say probably the same for you. So
she would appreciate that. She had to put up with me for a long time, which was not easy for her. So I'm sure she appreciates that. The very first question I got to start with is, when you were looking at moving into your current location, what was it about the location? Why did you choose the 1920s, this 1920s former Masonic temple as the location for the Village Studios?
Well, Cameron, first of all, I didn't do that. I didn't choose to move in. I didn't. I was not even in the recording business when the business started there. So there was a young man named George Hormel. Geordie was his nickname. He was the heir to the Hormel Meat Company fortune out of Minneapolis. And he was an extremely gifted musician and pianist. And in 1967, he bought the building, which at the time was the headquarters for the Maharishi, who came to Los Angeles from India and started his transcendental meditation practice in Los Angeles for the world. And he came in, and I guess a couple of years after that, Geordie Hormel, bought the building and built the first studio, which was Studio A. He was doing piano cues for Rin Tin Tin and Lassie, the TV shows your grandparents used to watch. And as soon as he did, the word got out that there's a very wealthy man who built a studio in West LA, and let's go there. And it's called the Village because of its proximity to Westwood Village. So it was called the Village Recorder when he opened it. And the Maharishi stayed for many, many years. My involvement is that I've had many past lives, but in this particular one, about 1995, in the early 90s, I was a concert promoter, and I was working for and running the booking for the Greek Theater in Los Angeles for a company called Niederlander. And I met a very attractive young woman, and sadly, like all very attractive, lucky for them, young women, they just became my friends, and she became my friend. And I did somewhat of a resurrection at the Greek. It was a pretty staid venue that featured Harry Belafonte and, some very middle of the road talent. And I was able to help it get reborn as a rock venue. So she thought maybe I could do the same for the studio, which at the time that she asked me to see if I could come save it, it was languishing. It was a time in the mid-90s when everybody had just realized they could go record in their houses with digital workstations and stuff. So the studio and her father had moved away to Phoenix, and the studio was about to be liquidated. And she asked if I could come in and see if we could save it. Long answer to a short question, but that's how I got there. And I think Jordy Hormel bought it at that time, probably not concerned or aware of how important the Masonic Temple would be for a recording studio. It was just at that time a big building that was for sale with an interesting tenant named the Maharishi, Mahesh Yogi. And that's how that occurred.
One thing I really found interesting during my tour is something that the tour guide mentioned, and forgive me, I can't remember her name, but super wonderful, super nice lady. She talked about, I'd always had it in my head, thinking about recording music, that the artist or the band has to come in person to the studio to do the recording. But she said that oftentimes they would work on recordings that were sent to them, that you could do things, work on digital recordings, clean up recordings, things like that. Over the last couple of years, how much has been going on in person versus how much has been done virtually? Has there been a change with COVID?
Well, yes, but for many years now, it's been possible with satellite technology and with digital telephony and everything else to have somebody singing in New York, have an orchestra in Prague, and everybody's recording into a console at the Village with the producer sitting at the Village, everybody watching everybody on TV screens. With COVID, we actually had to close for 4 months. Actually, we had Elton John on his way in that day, and we had to call and say, sorry, guys, March 19th, I think it was, the mayor closed the city, but we're closed. And so what we did, and we didn't do this for Elton, and forgive me for dropping wonderful names, but we started the Virtual Village, which we supplied templates and infrastructure to a lot of artists recording in their houses. We actually went to some artists' houses and set up what we call rigs, which is a recording, chain and stuff like that, microphones, etc., to allow them to record during the pandemic. We were closed for 4 months, and so that was a great way to indoctrinate some artists who were not that technologically savvy into the process, and to reinforce the careers of others who felt necessary to still be working and releasing stuff during that time.
One guest I've had on the podcast is his Mason brother, Neville Shend. He is with Pioneer Coaches out of Nashville. He does the tour buses for Brad Paisley, a lot of artists.
There's several coach companies like that in Nashville, and they all have these multi-million-dollar Prevos, exquisite buses, and there's a lot of people rolling around the country on those buses for sure.
Oh, they're absolutely amazing. And we talked about the impact of COVID on the touring industry side of it, and tour buses and concerts and live events. From your perspective, from the recording studio perspective, how did you find not only the 4 months, but the return to recording live? Is there still some impact from COVID, or is the industry on your side of it kind of returning to normal?
It's come back stronger than it ever was. That disruption caused a very pent-up desire for a lot of people to express themselves musically, and also to release music. So that you have a situation now where the venues are booked for the next 2 years, tours are booked for the next 2 years, and the business came back in a very, very big way, which I think will level out again, just like you see the sine wave of the stock market or music. Things tend to level out from the peaks and the valleys. So we've had a very strong return, which has been a blessing, because like the coach industry, like the touring business, like people that have venues, nobody knew if we were going to survive this. And guess what? we're still not 100% sure what's next after Omicron and, Delta. Is there more variants coming? I mean, or a giant comet that's going to blow us all to smithereens. It's like we're all kind of just waiting for what's next right now, but being the best we can be.
And it's really interesting to hear you say that. I can draw parallels to Freemasonry. In Ontario, our in-person meetings were suspended in February of 2020 or March of 2020.
Right.
And Canadians were a more cautious bunch of people, I suppose. We, in Ontario, Freemasonry in-person meetings didn't resume until November of this year.
Right.
And, there's a lot of questioning about how would it come back. And I do think you're seeing, even in the States where there was suspensions for Freemasonry, it's one of those, you don't realize what you've got till it's gone. A lot of pent up demand, a lot of people missing it. And if there is a silver lining to, the horror show that is COVID, my hope is, whether it be music and recording or Freemasonry, people maybe don't take for granted so much some of these things, and be more appreciative of opportunities to attend a concert, to record live, and, or in this case, to attend a Masonic meeting. Have you found that perhaps some of the artists are, grateful to be back and just, appreciative of the opportunity to record live once again?
Oh, absolutely. It seems to be a fundamental human desire to be with other people. Humans are social animals, and the idea of locking down. For me personally, I was never in my house more than 5 minutes. I'd go to the studio, go to work, come home, and go to maybe back to the studio, but I was very, very busy. So here I am now on my couch with just me. Oh my God, what a horrible idea. And so I find, and actually, I came to enjoy it. The silence was amazing. The lack of traffic noise was amazing. The beauty that I saw just in the nature around my house, of the birds and the trees, and watching a spring develop, sitting on my butt on my couch, was actually something I came to enjoy quite a bit. And the one thing I got to do was, I did a lot of spiritual things. I did yoga. I did, meditation, and really came to be quite comfortable with it for a minute, and started to rue the day I started hearing more and more traffic and everything else. So I don't know why I got off on a tangent. What exactly was your question again? I'm sorry.
No, I like that tangent. I think that's a valid point as well. Hopefully during the pandemic, it's one of those things where I think for Masons, for anybody, hopefully there was some moments where perhaps people got comfortable with, we live in such a busy world. It's appointments start at 9 and they finish at 9 at night. I'm sure in your case, being the owner of a studio, like the chance to maybe slow down a little bit and be more spiritual and meditative, and practice some of these self-care things. And then also looking forward to going back to work, I'm having a new perspective on it. I'm hoping that that's kind of I think that's what we saw in a lot of cases. A lot of people, I talked to them, the first time they had to try to rest and relax in forever was during the lockdown. And maybe they'll keep, some of these things, yoga, meditation, more in their mind as we slowly but surely reopen once again.
And hopefully we'll remain open. I mean, we just went through a period of last week or so. We weren't sure we were heading to another one. It seems that Omicron is not as deadly as they feared. Delta seems to be gaining strength. I mean, it's who knows? I mean, the point is, I think we all got a perspective like, we better just start enjoying the moment, because God knows what's next. And I lost a few very dear friends. I'm sure most people know of people that didn't make it, and so there's a lot of tragedy involved in this. It's not all joy and happiness about coming back and stuff. And we are left with God, I'm going to sound philosophical, but I mean, we're left in a world that has some very, very serious problems, like global warming, like an impending famine in Afghanistan, and and the clear understanding there's probably 2 billion people on this planet without clean water. So who am I to pontificate on those big matters? But I will tell you, as a small little guy in Los Angeles, I've come to be very grateful for every day. And I think that could be a widely held point of view.
I think so too. And one thing I will say, and I think that not only yourself, but the Village Studios is doing, and I've always felt this way, is one of the ways I think that the world is improved or people are brought together is through music. And I don't just mean that in a
Oh, I agree.
not just in a big concert type of way, which is what everybody thinks, but I remember I was at an open mic night. It was like my regular bar. So I was at an open mic night. There was a band playing, and I always think about this story in relation to music. Two members of the band had gotten into some type of tiff or fight. I don't know what it was about, but you could tell.
How unusual.
I
Anyway,
know, right?
yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that a few times. That you could feel when they weren't performing. You could feel like the tension. I knew them
Right.
both, but as soon as it was time to get on stage and perform, that tension went away because they were both so talented and so good at what they were doing that people have always responded to competence and ability. And if whatever they may have thought of each other off the stage, they both knew that they could trust each other on the stage to create something beautiful. And I really think that's also something I feel about Freemasonry. I've seen a lot of brothers have tiffs and have fights, but when they're within the lodge, the goal is to, through ceremony and ritual, try to create something beautiful. And I think in the case of the studio, it's to record something beautiful so other people can enjoy it. And I think what you do, what Village Studios does, it really does make a difference, and it really does make, a better world, a one that I enjoy significantly more, getting to listen to the music that's produced at Village Studio or recorded there. So I just think it's a wonderful thing. And I think it's a continuation of Freemasonry in a sense of trying to bring people together. So that's my way of saying thank you to you and thank you to your staff for recording some amazing music over the years.
Well, we certainly have been there. Cameron, our job really is to enable these people to come in and walk in without being having to be aware of much else other than being able to give one of the great performances of their life. And our job is to capture it without having someone reading a manual to see what broke and how to fix it and why we're not ready to capture that moment. So I appreciate that you saw that. And I think that this studio complex, which for the last over 50 years has recorded some of the most landmark music in history, I really do attribute some of the energy in that building to having been a Masonic temple. And I wish I could find out more about who originally built it. But I've come to appreciate some things about the buildings of Freemasonry, even though I don't have much knowledge of Freemasonry itself, which is that most of the Masonic lodges and temples seem to correlate very closely with the Eastern practice of Feng Shui, so that the orientation to the world and to the sun and everything else seems to be very, very smart. And so I think the building's energy is palpable. I really do. And I hope you felt it when you walked in. Or do all Masonic lodges pretty much have that kind of a subtle presence and feeling? I don't know that.
I think they do. I think they do for sure. And you do see commonalities amongst them, especially I find a lot of the commonalities are based on time period. So in the
Yeah,
1920s, there was a very standard type of architecture, especially as related to Masonic temples,
right.
kind of a neoclassical design. I was saying, I saw in the Village Studios, I saw parts of the studio that reminded me, I could have been even, just imagining it without the equipment and trying to imagine it in its original form, I could have been in my Masonic temple, which was built in
Sure.
1921. And that's a really fun feeling. Some temples come about later for whatever reason. Like I've been to a Masonic temple that was a repurposed farmhouse, which was
Right.
fascinating. But they all feel like home to me, I guess is what I would say. Um, and I got to, now this is the part where I become just a massive geek and a fan. I saw, I'll leave a link. I saw your Twitter account and, your Facebook. You're followed by Carole King, Tapestry, one of the greatest albums of all time, Way Over Yonder, one of the greatest songs of all time. And I remember even being the tour, being in the Fleetwood Mac room. And I'm just thinking of Stevie Nicks, and it's just amazing. How do you, I talked a little bit about it, but just the artist coming through the history of the recording aspect of the building. Um, how do artists know to find you? Is it the type of thing where, like, I guess, how does that whole process work? I've always wondered that. Do artists shop around for different studios, or do they work with their managers? I guess, how do they know to find you, and what's that process like of bringing them in or working with them?
Well, the artists usually, or their producers, pick the studios. And they obviously want something that they're comfortable in, something that other people have told them is a nice experience, because it's a huge undertaking to go in and record an album or even a single. It's expensive, and they want to be someplace that is good. I think the thing with the Village that's so incredible is you can have a record collection. You can grow up in the 50s, 60s, I'm sorry, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or currently, and look at some of your favorite records. Like, who did Steely Dan's Asia? Oh, it was the Village Recorder. It was recorded. I love the way that record sounds. Let's go there. Or my friend in the band Oasis told me, Johnny X and my band, that they had a great time. They went to the Village for an NPR broadcast. It's largely word of mouth. It's largely experience. And some people believe that certain places sound better than other places. And perhaps that's another element that the Masonic Temple energy is providing. But if you listen to some of the records, the Beach Boys, Say One Say, or Steely Dan, or Eric Clapton's After Midnight, or Tears in Heaven, or my God, Bob Dylan's Planet Waves, all these classic, or Carole King, who, by the way, is one of the loveliest people you ever meet. It's like, but not to sideswipe the original thought here. People go to places where they've heard, might have heard something like the way it sounds. Anybody can build a room and have a Battleship console in it, a big room on the other side of the glass where you put the instruments. But to have a room that's got this history and has consistently turned out winning product year after year seems to be why some people come. And there's no shortage, by the way, of great recording studios in Los Angeles or the world for that fact. Nashville, LA, Memphis, New York, London, a lot of great studios. St. Petersburg, Moscow, yeah. The manufacturers like to sell equipment.
I'm sure, and that equipment was amazing. I can barely control my phone and my laptop, and I'm looking at this. It was like three of me put together, this control panel.
Right.
And that also, I don't think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think a lot of people, myself included, we know intellectually that our music has to be recorded and produced, but we don't ever, just on an emotional level, the amount of work it takes to do it and the amount of training it takes for your staff. I mean, I can't imagine how much work it takes to be able to control one of those boards and record things well. What is the process like of learning that, of becoming a producer, recorder, like to be able to work at Village Studios? And it must take so much equipment and education and training.
Well, there's a lot of schools around the country that teach the art of recording. And almost every college, I'm sure, in your town must have classes in music recording. One of the great schools in Canada, in Toronto, is, or not Toronto, in oh my God, I'm trying to remember the name. What's one of the most prestigious universities in Canada? Give me a couple of names.
Vancouver. I'm trying
Not
to think
Vancouver.
big cities.
East.
East. Halifax.
McGill.
Okay.
Is one of the most notable recording schools. And there's Berkeley in Boston, and there's Cal Arts in LA. So it's not unlike learning how to be a CAT scan technician. There's a keyboard, there's a piece of glass in front of you, there's a big drum that's doing CAT scans. But in our case, there's a keyboard, or there's a large recording console and a glass window and band instruments. So it's a technical skill. So it is a technical trade. However, one of the things that I think distinguishes us is we only hire people that have become and gone to school and learned how to become technicians, but they're also consummate musicians, since that's the language that we speak. So, for instance, the Berkeley School of Music, and that's in Boston, Berklee, School of Music, is distinguished for having been the alma mater of Quincy Jones and John Mayer and everybody in between. Many of the most successful artists you know and you follow have been graduates there. And not all go to be recording artists or recording technicians. Some go to hone their skills as a performing artist. So it's an easy concept. If you look at a recording console, you see all these little strips of knobs and stuff. And in our case, we've got 92 strips side by side. Each one of those strips represents a channel of recording or a channel for one instrument or one voice or one violin. And all those knobs help control where you want it placed in the sound field when you get it done and mixed. But on the input, when you record it, it will help you mold and model the sound as well to be an optimum frequency. So it can fit with 96 or 12 or 196 or 3,000 other voices, so they don't all just become one big hashy, muddy sound. So the technology is not unlike trying to troubleshoot a broken headlight on a car. It's electron flow. So, and these consoles control how the sound is recorded and shaped.
I really like what you said. And I think that there's a lesson in there for Freemasonry, or for almost any group, I suppose. You talked about your hiring practices, and you're bringing on musicians, and I really think what that emphasizes is, yes, it's about technical expertise and knowing how to work the board, but it's also about, at the end of the day, it's about people and the ability for the person doing the recording to be able to communicate effectively with the artist or artists. And I get this way sometimes in Freemasonry, as I like to consider myself one of, a kind of a leader within the craft. But, it's one thing to know how something should be done. It's another thing to be able to effectively communicate that and to be able to work with people. And I think in your case, in the case of music and the staff, even something I felt, it's like they care about the technology, certainly. They care about how it's done, but they also seem to genuinely care about the people that they're recording and the people that are going to be listening to it. And I think that hiring practice of bringing on musicians, that just helps illustrate that, the importance of communication and caring about more than just a technical aspect, caring about the people also.
I think that's very astute and true. Certainly, it's the young people that are in the studio that actually become the invitation for the artists to come. And so we're hiring students out of colleges. They've made a commitment to go to this college for 4 years. to learn the craft of recording. And then they come in and they cut fruit and get hamburgers and move couches for the next year or so until it's their turn to go into a room as a second engineer. And so they're very dedicated. We really screen carefully to make sure we're not going to hire and train someone who 6 months later says, I decided I want to knit sportswear and I don't want to be a recording, technologist or an engineer. But the bottom line is they come in and they learn how we operate, and they learn the unspoken code of how to deal with talent and to make talent feel at home and comfortable, and how that we solely exist to capture their great performances. Sincerely, that's what we do. And so it's not as difficult and daunting as the large scale consoles might look to you, to a degree. To have someone that can think ahead of the artist and the producer on this complicated equipment and get the next move ready while the last one is being, consummated, that is a special skill. And pretty much because we are hiring what we think is the cream of the crop out of these wonderful schools, we're able to have a great collegial body of employees. What a dumb thing to say, but you know where I'm trying to go there.
It makes perfect sense to me.
Right.
And I absolutely think that's just something I felt, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it's important what you talked about. They start out being runners, doing work, moving couches.
Yeah.
Is a professional involved in professional wrestling, and I remember, many hours spent,
Wait,
sleeping.
stop. I want you to rewind about 22 seconds and say what you just said again. I wasn't sure I heard that right.
I'm a professional wrestling referee, and hopefully one day train to be a professional wrestler.
Oh my God, I'm glad I was nice to you.
Well, I'm right now I'm just counting to 3 and making sure the guys do what they're supposed to do. But I remember.
How exciting, man. That's unbelievable. Oh, by the way, I'm studying to be a wrestling ref and going to be a wrestler. That's crazy great. I love that.
Knock on wood. I've been very lucky.
What a great life you have, man. You really do.
Thank you so much. Great. No, I feel very lucky with my life, and it's been wonderful. A lot of people had to put up with a lot from me, but it's worked out well, at least in terms of my life. And yeah, but one thing in professional wrestling school is, you learn moves, you learn how to do what you have to do, but a lot of the lessons you learn are when you have to sweep the ring after practice, or be down on your, sweep the floor, or move the ring to the venue. That's really important.
The fundamentals is what we call it. Absolutely. It's just same as cleaning a studio, or in my case, for many, many years, doing concerts, is cleaning up after the lights go out and hoping your shins don't hit what they call iron mushrooms, which are the tent stakes. When it's dark at night, you don't happen to see those. And I can't describe how that feels when you swing your leg into a big metal tent stake. The key thing is just keep walking and don't stop and look, because it's never good. But it's all the fundamentals. I absolutely understand that. Yes.
Absolutely. Fundamentals are so important. I want to go back to the start of the interview. I don't know if you ever had the chance to speak with him, or heard anything secondhand, but do you know what it was about the building that caused the Maharishi to create it as a meditation studio? Did he ever talk about what drew him to the building?
Never had a chance, but I will talk to David Lynch, actually, who's one of his chief disciples, who learned TM in that building, and see if I can glean anything from there. What I would imagine was the big spaces. There's 2 big Masonic spaces upstairs. There's the one that's a theater, and the one we call the Moroccan room, which we recently rediscovered, which is the ornate ceremony room with the columns and stuff. But I think that coming to the US and having a practice that required you to sit in front of a lot of people and talk about meditation, have group meditations there. I think the attraction was the big spaces upstairs in the building, the big high ceiling, open spaces, common in so many Masonic temples. And by the way, this building is not a huge former Masonic temple. But it is, for 1920, it must have seemed like the Titanic, you know?
Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely a good size, especially for the 1920s. Um, I wonder also, this is something I talked about when I was doing the tour a little bit. One thing Masonic temple architects had to take into account was acoustics.
Yes, absolutely.
So how have you found the building in terms of your needs? Did you have to do a lot of work on it to
Yes.
make it suitable? Or I'm sure bringing the equipment in and stuff was a lot of work, but just did you find the building suitable for your needs, or how much work did it take to make it suitable?
It's taken a lot. And in some ways, we'll never really fully accomplish uh, perfection because the building was built before there was amplified sound. So can you imagine, there's big 14-inch spaces in the rafters between the floors. There was no thought to, my God, if we're running drums and a bass down below, what are they going to hear upstairs? So the sound isolation elements have been daunting. And the other thing was that this building is very unique. There was a air conditioning system in 1920 that was relied on convection. From what I can figure, and I've not talked to an expert, there's metal ducts, which are square, so 3 inches deep or maybe 5 inches deep and 14 inches across, metal ducting like this, that go up and down all 3 floors and terminate near the roof, which I believe had some sort of a metal plate or convection plane that would heat up. And there was an air exchange that occurred just by heat differential that caused air to circulate in the building. And these ducts, discovering where these were, because how can I hear someone talking on the 3rd floor if I'm in the lobby, have been very, very troubling for us. We had to discover where they were and find them and stuff. And these were the original way that they moved air through the building and possibly heat. And it's an interesting building from that respect. I still don't have plans for it. And I still don't know much of the history, like who built it, what happened after it was the Masonic Temple and all that stuff. But the actual construction and the way the walls are built, and the acoustics in the large rooms upstairs are extraordinary. Really, really great.
And just so and I may do another podcast episode about this. I have got in touch with I can't think of the name now, the Grace D. May Museum, I believe it was. Anyways, I have been checking around with some of my Masonic contacts in Los Angeles and California to see if I can track down any more history of the building. And if I can, I'll be sure to send it to you. And
I'd love to. Well, that'd be great.
I think Santa Monica Lodge has them. I think they became. So anyways, as soon as I can track it down, I will let you know. And I'm sure there's got to be something somewhere. And that's an interesting thing about Los Angeles. Probably the thing I appreciated most about the city. And I'm not sure if this is just a coincidence or if it has to do with maybe something in Los Angeles bylaws or heritage preservation. I never mind so much to see a Masonic temple sold to another group or entity, because that's life. It happens. But it's always such a shame when these buildings are sold and then, demolished or torn down.
That's terrible. Absolutely.
As has happened in Chicago Southside Masonic Temple got torn down. In Alabama, one of the Masonic temples there has become like a place for urban explorers because it was left abandoned and now there's trees growing inside of it. And
Oh, how cool.
so I guess it's cool in a way, but it's still a shame in the sense that it's, it's not being used for anything. It's just a slowly deteriorating building.
And where
It's
is
nice,
that?
Alabama.
Got it.
But Los Angeles, I was amazed and really happy to see 1920s era Masonic temples not only still in use, but the Masonic characteristics preserved, like Village Studios. The Jimmy Kimmel Show was filmed at a Masonic temple, and it
So
still has the etchings on front. Scottish Rite building,
that's a gorgeous building. And
isn't
that's
it though?
that's a 1960s building.
What is it about? Is it? I mean, I don't know if you know or not, but is there something about Los Angeles in particular that encourages, the preservation of these heritage buildings, or is it the Masonic buildings in particular that people like to preserve? It's just great to see them still in use, still a place of life, and to see the facades maintained and even the interiors, the Masonic elements in many cases maintained.
Sure. I can answer that, I think. Being a longtime Angelino myself, all of Los Angeles is still under the influence of Hollywood in the 20s. All the little houses on the hillside, if you drove around before they started building these lot line to lot line, creepy mega mansions and ripping down everything. And so you'll see nice cottage, giant, huge, out of scale warehouse house type house, which is disgusting. And so there's the element of noir, like film noir, and there's an appreciation of great architecture for sure by some people, and there's also a historical preservation architectural element in Los Angeles, which is good and bad. So if your building gets classified as a historic building, you cannot do anything else to it ever to modernize it or anything like that. But the Masonic temples, by and large, featured high ceilings, great spaces, all the elements you'd want to have in a building that you're going to spend time in either working or recreating or anything like that. So the buildings, as I've seen, are spectacular. Whether they're economically viable and have to be torn down, which is the result of modern, commerce, is a different story. But I feel that we've got some great examples of Masonic architecture in Los Angeles, and I think it's been appreciated to a large extent. I mean, the Jimmy Kimmel Masonic Lodge is right next to, I think, the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood Boulevard. So the architecture, having been influenced by a lot of the early 20s movie moguls and stuff like that, is always part of the fabric of LA. Now all you see everywhere these modern boxes where they're utilizing every square inch of space inside, and glass and like fake wood that doesn't bleach out in the sun. These buildings have held up tremendously well, and they're tremendously beautifully built, which of course it's the Masons who could do it better. So I think hope with all hope, these buildings will be around for a long time to come.
Absolutely. And I have to say thank you to, yourself and the Village Studios. It was just so wonderful to see, you still see the Masonic Temple etched on the outside of the building. And when you go into the Moroccan room, you see the pillars. And as a Mason, it's wonderful to see a Masonic Temple that's not only, it still exists, but is just such a place of, life, music, and creating something that goes out to the world, and to see those elements preserved, to see the Moroccan room. And, I, as a Mason, I can imagine what it was like in the 20s and the 30s. I can get a pretty good sense of where they sat.
That'd be amazing. Well, I'm certainly anxious to find out more of the history. I mean, I don't know where to go with that. Somebody once told me, well, they built it, but they never occupied it. I don't know anything about it, Cameron. So I'm hoping I'm not sitting here falsely claiming or doing anything that could be misleading. All I know is the building says Masonic Temple on the front. It has all the pillars that are remarkable, and the porticos look like a Masonic temple. If this was the creation of some Hollywood film in the late 20s, I don't know, but it seems to be genuine. And it's interesting for a 1920 building, or 21 or 2. It's got giant red steel beams. It's one of the first steel buildings, I think, steel reinforced buildings in Los Angeles. So it's a spectacular building with regard to the infrastructure of it and the bones of it. And it's been through major earthquakes and never lost a brick. So, you know, I think it definitely is a Masonic temple. It's got the 5 sides, which I understand is something predicated for Masonic temple. So whatever it is, I think every great artist that's ever done a great record there owes a tip of the hat to the Masons for sure.
And it's definitely legit. Like I said, I've found out some information in terms of, it was originally Los Angeles Lodge was meeting there. Now they meet at the Santa Monica Masonic Temple, which is down close to the Santa Monica Pier.
Right.
I'm not quite sure when they moved, but I'm going to talk to my contacts there and see if I can find something, because hopefully there's still some photographs floating around somewhere.
Great. Karen, that would be great. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave in a minute. If you want to do more of this, I'd be very honored. I've enjoyed this tremendously and enjoy you very, very much, Cameron. And I hope to see you in person in LA again soon as well.
I would love to come back. I had an absolutely amazing time in Los Angeles, and a big part of that was Village Studios. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
And Cameron, happy holidays. And I hope that we can continue learning more about each other. I'd like to know a lot more about you. And Cameron, thank you so much.